And now, Denis Villeneuve's Dune, the big-budget blockbuster adaptation of monumentally influential, infamously challenging to adapt genre fiction. For anyone who watched Fellowship of the Ring and thought, this would be a lot better if the pre-title prologue were 2.5 hours long and then the rest of the movie ended when Gandalf takes off after the birthday party like, I think I'd better go look into this whole ring business, seems important. But it's okay, because then the filmmakers are like, yeah, okay, but aren't you glad we already greenlit, secured, and mostly completed the sequels that are definitely gonna happen so that an entire movie of only setup doesn't feel like a gargantuan waste of your time? I'm sorry. We didn't? We didn't. Not at all? Not at all. Well, shit. Contrary to reputation, Frank Herbert's Dune probably isn't so much too dense or confusing for most to wrap their heads around when it comes to getting its proper adaptations off the ground, so much as a lot of it takes place in the realm of mind, involving narratives affected by dreams and hallucinogenic drug use, and figure prominently in the narrative and indulge quite a lot of heavy-handed allegory to familiar recurring mythological themes, both in the straightforward and subversive sense, all things that tend to be distracting to both readers and would-be translators in terms of pulling them away from what's otherwise a complicated but not exactly opaque storyline. David Lynch's most famous version also most famously found itself getting a little lost in fixating on the psychedelia. Other versions and attempted versions have gotten weighted down trying to find ways to art design their way out from under just how hefty the mythic illusions and savior tropes weigh down its more original virtues. So if nothing else, I've got to extend praise, however partly backhanded it may sound, for sincerely surprising me with just how boldly this version of Dune sidesteps these concerns altogether by just choosing not to have them, I guess, so far as is evident on screen. Half the main characters tripping balls and just going on mind journeys to advance the plot? Nah, just have the kid talk about having dreams, do a couple fast cutaways to some stuff with it just out of focus like every other movie with a not necessarily committing to it vision things does. Too much of the trippy stuff could pull time away that could otherwise be spent with very stern men with strategically unkempt facial hair holding policy meetings in monochromatic settings with saturation sliders cranked way the hell down. And without enough of that, how will people know this is cinema and not just a movie? And while there is to be sure plenty to praise in the subtler details of costume design and set choices glimpsed in the wider scope of the film's universe, the primary setting of the desert planet Arrakis, its people, its buildings, fauna, etc. are all so recognizably planet the Middle East, its technology, art, aesthetic, ambient sound, vehicles, etc. so unmistakably every post-9/11 war movie but with space stuff in their design choices, I kept expecting the Activision and Treyarch logos to pop up. And this almost refreshing, not even gonna try approach to avoiding these potential roadblocks applies to the rest of it. I almost wouldn't be surprised if the thought process wasn't literally, you know what guys, fuck it, we might as well just steer into the skid. Timothy, put on your literal purple and white space Jesus robes and go become Space Lawrence to the space Arabs in this war for space oil.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
For posterity, the main plot is sci-fi feudalism political struggle. We're in space, there's a desert planet that's the only source of a mysterious element called the spice that makes interstellar travel possible but also gets you crazy high, but it's hard to collect and refine because the desert is full of giant monster worms. The wealthy family of bad space royals who'd been running the operation just got replaced by a family of nice space royals whose teenage heir apparent is played by Timothée Chalamet and also believed to be a promised space messiah figure by the indigenous people of said planet, mostly because his mom is also a space nun from an order that's been strategically trying to breed said messiah for centuries, and she thinks she done pulled it off because he can use the same special shouting magic powers she has. Also, the reassigning of the nice space royals to the desert planet is actually a trap to eliminate them as a threat to power by the Emperor, so eventually the young hero is going to be on his own, learning to lead before his time by uniting his imperiled remaining family members with the natives who may worship him, unlocking his true fate and power, which is also kind of a subversion of the white savior trope on the basis that we're kind of blaming it on duplicitous women, so 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but also kind of not because he still does it, and eventually after leaping through what would have been 3 very satisfying natural endings, they land on one that's more of a, okay, and decide to hope the director and the studio patch things up so they can finish this someday.
It's over. A lot of people in the audience look pissed.
So, yeah, a project that everyone said wasn't gonna work and at best could mainly hope to be another ambitious, nice try guys, doesn't really work and is another ambitious, nice try guys, which is deeply frustrating in the way that watching a mountain of good intentions, earnest effort, and half-realized potential go partly unrealized always is. So much of the film is devoted to setting things that might get to happen later, not just in terms of concrete plot points, but the idea of how characters might develop, what sights might be seen, or what people are supposed to mean to each other, that it always feels like something else is getting in the way of something else. We meet one character, but we're they're already supposed to be thinking about another, who it turns out is only going to be theoretically important later on, maybe. When it's allowed to just spreading itself out and letting Villeneuve and his team show off their particular visions of this big collection of sundry characters and concepts that so much of the genre has borrowed from and retooled over the decades, it really does kind of sing. The spacecraft are cool, there's decent action. Yes, as I stated, making everything look so profoundly, doesn't this remind you of X thing from history or Y recent world event is a choice, but at least it's consistent approach, and it makes the handful of genuinely otherworldly elements like the sandworms and the grotesque Harkonnen villains really stand out when they need to. The big varied cast is uniformly pulling its own weight. Chalamet especially is impressive and on proper footing, surrounded by literally armies of more established talent, and it's an impressive turn likewise for Zendaya, despite the fact that her role, while omnipresent, is also somehow not in much of the film. Let it also not be said that for however self-serious and dour everything is, Villeneuve is not exactly the filmmaker you want for this kind of material to play out with big faux liturgical grandeur it mostly needs to not be a parody. There's a grim, dusty muddiness to everything that feels tactile and physically there. It's so much a part of the literal and figurative atmosphere. Everyone involved is bringing their A-games in terms of just selling that this is a real place. I can't say that my mind didn't wander, that I wasn't as enraptured as I probably was supposed to be, but I wasn't exactly bored either, and it doesn't so much have pacing issues, so much as, look, sometimes there's no middle ground with these things. Either cut it to the generalities and burn it out as a 20-minute pure mood piece, or make it 5 hours long and accept that your audience is going to need some preparation H. That having been said, there is always a lot to admire in ambition, even perhaps especially when it's outsized against what may always have been impossible odds. Who knows if Dune was ever meant to work, or if enough people were ever going to care if it did, but I'm glad to see the effort mounted, and I honestly do hope they get to take their swing at the rest of it, even if I can't in good conscience go higher than a 6 out of 10.